A homeless boy approached a vehicle hoping to receive some change, but what he found inside the car was something he could never have imagined. The sight left him so shaken that, unable to contain his emotions, he began to cry. Dawn colored the sky in pink tones, while the first rays of sunlight touched the face of Guilherme, an 8-year-old boy who woke up under a piece of cardboard in a forgotten alley in the city. The morning cold made him curl up, trying to absorb the little warmth he could before facing another difficult day. With a heavy sigh, Guilherme felt his stomach growl, reminding him that it had been 3 days since his last decent meal, and not those insignificant scraps found next to a dumpster. Hunger was a constant companion, and each day, without food, seemed to drag on longer than the last. Slowly, he stretched and carefully folded the cardboard bed he had been lying on, hiding it behind the large dumpster to ensure it would still be there when he returned. His water bottle, nearly empty, only offered a few sips before it ran out, but it was enough to wash away the bitter taste in his mouth. Guilherme, with the same determination as always, began his daily routine, walking from store to store, from bakery to bakery, hoping to get at least a piece of bread to satisfy his hunger. However, that day, the responses he received were even harsher than usual. "Get out of here, boy. There's nothing for you today. I already gave you some a few days ago, and you still come back asking for more?" shouted a man, shooing him away with a brusque gesture. "But, sir, it could be some old bread that's left over," pleaded Guilherme, placing his thin little hand on his empty belly. "I already told you to get out." The man advanced on the boy, whose ragged and tired appearance only showed the deplorable state he was living in. Although some people felt sorry for the boy's situation, no one was willing to do anything concrete to help him. At just 8 years old, Guilherme seemed to carry the weight of the world on his small, abused shoulders. His skin, dried out by the relentless sun, and his face marked by the harshness of life on the streets, made him look much older than he really was. Even so, he continued his journey aimlessly, his small hands folded, begging for a little compassion. But the only response he received was indifference or harsh words. No one seemed willing to look beyond the surface and understand the sad reality of a child alone in the world, struggling daily just to survive. With each refusal, the weight of loneliness and despair deepened in Guilherme. He walked the streets, each step a reminder of his invisibility to those around him, begging for a little attention, but receiving only silence in response. "If not even my mother wanted me, why would they care?" he thought sadly, while hunger seemed to gnaw at his insides. Almost giving up, the little boy was surprised by a kind-looking lady who handed him 5 Brazilian reals. "Here, my dear, it's all I have," she said, her soft voice like a balm for the boy's aching heart. Guilherme smiled gratefully, and with the money in hand, he ran to the nearest bakery, looking forward to a hot meal that could offer him some comfort on that cold day. At the bakery, he bought a bread with cheese and a coffee, and his eyes shone with the anticipation of savoring each bite. "Here's your coffee, boy," the employee said with a welcoming smile as she handed him the tray. Beaming, Guilherme chose a table and sat down, preparing to enjoy that moment, a small victory in the midst of a day full of challenges. Guilherme felt a brief joy when he finally held in his hands the long-awaited bread and cheese and hot coffee, but this happiness was quickly interrupted. The woman behind the counter, upon observing his condition, did not hesitate to say sharply, "You can't sit here, go away, go eat outside." Her voice was cold, devoid of any sympathy, reflecting more concern for the establishment's image than for the well-being of a hungry boy. "You stink," she added, without a trace of compassion. Guilherme's heart, already so fragile, sank completely, with an old wound opening again. Tears began to well up in his eyes, but he remained silent, resigned. He took his food and left the bakery, finding a discreet corner on the sidewalk to sit down. As he bit into his bread and drank his coffee, which now seemed bitter and tasteless in light of the humiliation he had just suffered, Guilherme could not shake from his mind the memories of Arminio, his old friend and guardian who had raised him on the streets. It had been exactly a year since Arminio had died, the victim of a massive heart attack. In that moment of despair, Guilherme had run for help, But no one was willing to help a homeless person, and when he returned, it was already too late. The loss of Arminio left an immense void in his life, a void that no bread and cheese could fill. The old man had been more than a friend. He was his only family. Arminio taught Guilherme how to survive on the streets, sharing not only life lessons, but also an unconditional love that the boy would never forget. Now, as he stood there on the sidewalk, eating his bread, Guilherme was wearing a gray shirt that had belonged to Arminio. It was too big for his small body, looking more like a dress, but it carried a deep meaning. The shirt was a symbol of the continued presence of his only life partner, a reminder of the love and protection he missed so much. With every bite, every sip of coffee, Guilherme wished he could share that moment with Arminio, to feel the comforting presence of the old man by his side. However, all that remained were the memories, witnesses of a better time. Even so, Guilherme knew that, despite the loneliness and pain, he had to keep fighting, just as Arminio had taught him. After finishing his meal and reflecting on his old friend's words, Guilherme, the homeless boy, felt a renewed determination grow within him. He remembered the most valuable advice that Arminio had always given him. "The world can be very hard on us, son. It doesn't like people like us. But you have to be strong. Just because they knocked you down doesn't mean you won't get up. Keep fighting." These words echoed in his mind as he discarded the used cup and napkin, preparing to face another difficult day. Guilherme knew he needed to get money to guarantee some food later, so with renewed hope, he headed to the busiest traffic light in town. There, he began approaching cars, asking for money in the hope of finding some compassion or kindness from the drivers. While some gave him some change, others didn't even look at him, keeping their windows closed and ignoring his presence. The rejections were constant, and the words of contempt such as "get out of here," "you dirty brat," "go get a job instead of begging," were painfully familiar. Although he was accustomed to these humiliations, they still hurt him, especially when he saw families with children in cars, all dressed for school, talking and laughing. This sight heightened his awareness of his own deprivation. He never had the chance to wear a school uniform, never had the opportunity to learn to read or write, because his beloved Arminio did not have these skills to teach him either. Watching the children returning from soccer, full of enthusiasm for the game, Guilherme felt even more distant from that happy and carefree reality. "Why did my mother abandon me? What did she not like about me?" he asked himself, extending his small hand to the passing cars. But despite his discouragement, the old man's words encouraged him to keep his head up, refusing to give in to despair. As the traffic light changed, Guilherme moved from car to car, his approach motivated both by hope and the determination not to give up, even in the face of the indifference and contempt he encountered. It was then that a specific vehicle caught Guilherme's attention. Unlike the other cars he had approached, this one radiated a presence that instantly aroused his curiosity. Something inside him told him that this encounter could be significant, perhaps even the most important of his life. Without knowing exactly why, Guilherme felt his heart race, as if guided by an intuition that told him to head towards the vehicle. Each step towards that car seemed charged with potential, as if the air around him was dense with possibilities and nervousness mixed with a kind of foreboding in his small body. It was as if he knew, deep down, that this moment could be more than just another attempt to earn a few bucks. It could be the beginning of a profound change, a turning point in his difficult life journey. As he cautiously approached, the car stopped at the traffic light. He noticed that the front windows were closed and the adults inside seemed completely absorbed in their conversations, oblivious to his presence. It seemed that they didn't even notice the boy's silhouette approaching timidly and anxiously. But then, something completely unexpected happened. The window of the back seat began to open slowly, revealing a sight that left Guilherme paralyzed. He stopped abruptly, his eyes wide with surprise and curiosity. Behind that window, he saw another boy, about his age, with an expression as perplexed as his own. The boy inside the car was watching him intently, his big eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and confusion. With a soft voice, almost a whisper, the boy called to his mother in the front seat. "Mommy, look here." The woman, intrigued, turned to answer her son's call and, upon seeing the little ragged boy outside, let out a muffled cry of surprise. Beside her, the man driving the car also turned around, astonished by what he saw. "What is this?" he exclaimed, clearly shocked. Guilherme couldn't take his eyes off the boy inside the car. Tears began to well up in his eyes as he realized how similar they were. It was as if he were looking at a clean, well-groomed version of himself. The boy inside the car was wearing a school uniform, had neatly combed hair, and visibly healthy skin. They were practically identical. The mother, moved by a maternal impulse and still in shock at the scene in front of her, looked at her husband urgently and said, "Unlock the car, honey." Without hesitation, she opened the door and, completely ignoring the fact that they were in the middle of the street, ran towards the ragged boy who was outside. The father urgently walked around the car, not lagging behind his wife. Both were driven by a mixture of shock and an urgent need to understand what was happening. As they approached Guilherme, the woman watched him with an expression that mixed horror and compassion, as if she were seeing the ghost of a son she never had, but which at the same time awakened her deepest fears about human misery. "This is impossible." "Who are you, boy?" she asked directly to the little homeless man, who was as stunned as she was and unable to find the words to respond. At that moment, the traffic light changed and the traffic began to move, with cars honking impatiently. Realizing the need to act quickly to avoid an accident, the man drove forward with the vehicle, parking a little further ahead, and ran back, pulling his son by the hand back to where his wife and Guilherme were on the sidewalk. "How is this possible?" he murmured, with an expression of disbelief and confusion. The surreal scene at that busy intersection left everyone perplexed, trying to understand how two children so identical could exist in such opposite living conditions. While the family tried to process what was happening, Guilherme remained there, like a mirror image of their son, each one confronting a reality that defied any logical explanation. That moment was charged with intense emotion, marking the beginning of a series of discoveries and questions about identity, destiny, and the invisible connections that intertwine people's lives. But there was something the parents didn't know. How could they not know that boy who seemed to be the living reflection of their own son? They were unaware of the fact that they had a lost son, identical to the one they had raised with so much love. To understand this incomprehensible situation, we need to go back in time and unravel the events that led them to this point. 8 years earlier, Maria Isabella and Alfredo, a wealthy couple, celebrated the arrival of their beautiful baby, little Enrique. These were times of joy and anticipation for the new family, but unbeknownst to them, they were victims of a horrendous practice. The luxury hospital where Maria Isabella gave birth was the center of operations for a gang specialized in stealing babies. This criminal group deceived mothers, claiming that their newborns had not survived or, in the case of twins, separated the babies, keeping one of them a secret. It all started when Maria Isabella had her first ultrasound and the doctor, who was part of the gang, discovered that she was expecting twins. Throughout the pregnancy, the doctor, in conspiring with the group, lied to the couple, saying that they were expecting only one baby. At the time of delivery, Maria Isabella, who dreamed of a natural birth, was anesthetized under the pretext of needing a cesarean section to avoid risks, allowing the criminals to carry out their plan without interruption. One of the babies was secretly removed and destined to be sold to people who could not have children. Unfortunately, the fate of Guilherme, the stolen baby, took a tragic turn. He was given to a couple who rejected him because he did not meet their expectations. They wanted a blonde, blue-eyed boy, and little Guilherme did not fit that description. In an act of extreme cruelty, the couple abandoned the baby, then only a few weeks old, in a shoebox in a dark alley. It was in this alley that old Arminio, a homeless man, found Guilherme. Despite the precarious conditions in which he lived, Arminio raised the boy with all the love and care he could offer, giving him the chance to survive, even in the midst of hardship. Guilherme was taught from an early age to survive the harsh realities of the streets. Thus, he grew up without knowing that he had a biological family, and that family, in turn, never imagined the existence of a second child. His parents and his twin brother lived all these years without suspecting that, Somewhere in the same city, a part of their family was facing a life full of challenges and deprivations. The reunion that occurred, therefore, was not only surprising, it was an overwhelming revelation and a rediscovery of bonds that seemed lost, but that had never been known. It all seemed like the work of fate, and the events that followed were a true emotional roller coaster, alternating between moments of madness and happiness for little Guilherme and his newfound family. Brought home by his biological parents, Guilherme had the chance to start a new life, but this transition was not at all easy. Although full of exciting moments, the first days were challenging, as the boy struggled to adapt to an environment completely different from the one he was used to on the streets. He slept clutching Mr. Arminio's old gray shirt, still unable to believe that all of this was really happening. However, the feeling of finally belonging to a family, something he had never experienced before, made him cry with happiness. As time went by, Guilherme began to open up to his new reality. The nights he spent awake on the streets were replaced by nights of peaceful sleep in a warm bed, surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. Although the adjustment was difficult, the love and patience of Guilherme's biological parents became essential in helping him feel safe and loved in his new home. The connection that formed between him and his twin brother was instantaneous, as if, somehow, they had always known each other. This journey of reunion and adaptation was marked by many ups and downs, but also by a deep feeling of redemption and renewed love. William, who once felt lost and invisible, now discovered the true meaning of belonging and being loved, and that was what ultimately brought tears of happiness to his eyes. Enrique, Guilherme's twin brother, was overjoyed to finally discover that he had a sibling. The joy of having a brother after so many years was evident in his smile. His parents, although deeply happy with the reunion, could not help but feel enormous remorse. "Forgive me, my love, forgive me," said his mother as she hugged him tightly, both crying with a mixture of sadness and relief. Guilherme, who had always believed he had been abandoned, was now experiencing a roller coaster of emotions. He felt a mixture of disbelief and joy upon discovering that he did indeed have a mother and a father who, despite never having known of his existence, already loved him deeply. At the same time, the family decided to report the hospital where the babies had been stolen, triggering a major investigation that led to the dismantling of the gang responsible for these horrendous acts. The story became one of the biggest revelations of the year, widely reported by the media, and caused commotion throughout the country. The news coverage shocked the population and mobilized other families who began searching for their children, suspecting that they too might have been victims of the same scheme. Some of these families found hope, while others were faced with the bitter pain of late discoveries. The repercussions of the case were immense, resulting in significant changes in security policies and in the monitoring of hospitals and clinics throughout the country. Meanwhile, Guilherme, now surrounded by the love of his parents and brother, felt deeply grateful for every moment of this new life. However, he would never forget old Arminio, the man who raised him with so much love and dedication on the streets. Guilherme knew that, wherever Arminio was, the old man would be happy for him, for having finally found his true origins and for living the life he always deserved. This new phase in Guilherme's life was marked by daily discoveries and adjustments, but above all, it was a celebration of love and human resilience. The family was determined to make up for all the lost years, building together a future full of love and possibilities. The story of Guilherme and his family is a powerful testament to the love that can transcend the darkest situations, bringing light and hope where there was once only darkness. If you are moved by this story, the next video that appears on your screen will certainly touch you deeply as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next moving stories. A big kiss, and see you next time.